Well, welcome everybody to our November version of the Oregon City Business Alliance monthly forums. We'd like to welcome all of you. We've got a lot of material to go through today. I've looked at the slide presentations that our representatives from ODOT will be displaying here shortly, and we're going to be packing a lot of information for you today. So we'd like to go ahead and get started if we could. But before that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce some of our elected officials. We have State Senator Bill Kennemer back there. Thank you, Bill. And we have one of our state representatives, Mark Meek. Where did Mark disappear to? There you go, Mark. Good to see you. And we have some of our county commissioners, Mark Scholl and Paul Savas. Is Brian Nava here? I know that he signed up but may not have gotten here yet. And we have someone from the Tualatin City Council here with us today. Kristen Sacco, is that correct? Okay, great. Well, we welcome all of you because obviously being a public servant requires a tremendous amount of time and commitment, and we can't appreciate enough everything that you put into fulfilling your roles and responsibilities in those positions. I'd also like to introduce Shelley Perini. Many of you know her already from a lot of different positions she's had, now being with West, but she's our newest addition to the Oregon City Business Alliance Board and will be attending our annual retreat a week from today up at Clackamas Community College. Brian?
Yeah, this is Greg from Minor Museum too.
Okay. Greg Weston.
Greg Weston from, where's he from?
3J Consulting.
3J Consulting.
Well, and we may have him join our board of directors sometime soon too. I've known Greg for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
You'd be a tremendous addition, Greg, so we'll bring that up next Tuesday at the board meeting.
You always talk behind my back.
I do. You ought to be used to it by now. Well, I know everybody's going to be having turkey here in a couple days, so we kind of deviated from the turkey and dressing and cranberries. But again, I want to give a special thanks to the kitchen crew for the Abernethy Center for just a fantastic job they did again today. And I'm sure there's some desserts over there, so don't forget your sweet tooths when we're done. Well, as I said, today we've got a lot of information to go through, and I know that a lot of you are going to have questions at the end, specifically dealing with what's going to be taking place with the George Abernethy Bridge. But we have two speakers with us today. I'm going to get my glasses on here, if you don't mind. Della Mosier, who's the Deputy Director with the Oregon Department of Transportation Urban Mobility Office. She shared with me that she's from Newburgh. I believe that's correct. And she brings more than 20 years of transportation public works experience, ranging from mega projects along I-15 Resort Corridor in Las Vegas to pedestrian improvements in Sisters, Oregon. And we also have Alan Hendy with us today. He's a resident engineer for the Oregon Department of Transportation. A little bit of Alan's background here for you. He's a professional engineer with almost 20 years of experience in transportation project delivery and construction. He is currently serving as the resident engineer for the Urban Mobility Office at ODOT. So I'd like to welcome, and Matt over there, not really sure what your role is, but I think you'll let us know as the event goes on. So thank you for attending as well. So our goal is to go ahead and get through the PowerPoint presentation, hopefully by 12:30 or thereabouts, and then leave a half hour for a Q&A. So as before, if you remember, the blue cards on your table are for questions. Feel free to go ahead and start filling them out whenever you want. We're going to save them to the end. And our administrative assistant, Sherry Himes, she's running around here somewhere. If you just lift your hand up, there's Sherry. When you have a question card completed, she'll come by and pick it up, and then we'll get all the panelists to go ahead and respond to those. So with that being said, Della, I think you're up first. Here you go.
Oh, got the cord for me.
And we're going to go ahead and turn the lights down a little bit now so that the slides will come through better. So if you need to take a big bite of your lunch, now is the time to do so. There we are.
Thanks so much. All right. Go ahead and set this down. Oh.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? Good deal. Well, again, thank you all so much for having us here to talk about one of the most exciting projects and programs here in the Portland metro area. Again, my name is Della Mosier. I'm the Deputy Director of ODOT's Urban Mobility Office, and I grew up in Newburgh, graduated from Tigard High, traveled around the West Coast, did lots of big projects, got to come back and help reform Sisters, Oregon about 10 years ago, and now live about 9 miles from where I was living in high school. So full circle for me, and what an exciting, amazing time to be back here in the Portland metro area with all the amazing transportation improvement opportunities that we have in front of us. So thank you again for having us here today. I will put a fine point on Matt Delata, who is a consultant with WSP, and he is here as our phone a friend on traffic diversion questions. So I'll be diverting to Matt as we get into more detail around those topics. Pun definitely intended. Okay. Let's see. Here we go. There we are. Okay, so how did we get here? I was talking with Alan. I drove down the 5 and the 2, but we actually got to this place, not just directions, but we got here in this place with the type of programs and opportunities we have about 6 years ago. The governor asked the legislature to send around a transportation visioning panel, traveled all over the state. At that time, I was working for ODOT in Bend, Oregon, had a chance to converse with that joint committee on transportation. And what that committee heard all across the state, from the timber mills in Klamath Falls to the wheat growers in the Dalles, was that the congestion in the Portland metro area was impacting local Oregon businesses' ability to get their products to market. And then, of course, here in the Willamette Valley, that issue for folks in business, operating small businesses, was exacerbated even more. So as a result, the legislature passed a transformational bill in 2017 called House Bill 2017. And that bill provided funding for many construction projects, very meaningful construction projects across the state. Here in the Portland metro area, it provided construction funds for the Oregon 217 project, which is currently under construction, as well as the I-5 Rose Quarter project. That legislation also directed ODOT to invest in understanding and pursuing the opportunity to implement tolling in the Portland area to be able to fund other important priority projects like the I-205 improvements project. In 2020, the Oregon Transportation Commission then asked ODOT to establish the Urban Mobility Office. And our charge is really to find a comprehensive way to manage a transportation system, and more importantly, manage congestion in the Portland metro area. And then finally, just this year, House Bill 3055 was passed, which provided the funding flexibility for us to accelerate some of the projects that would be paid for with toll funds, as well as underscored the importance of implementing tolling in the Portland metro area. Next slide. So I don't have to explain to all of you who travel around this region that there's a lot of congestion in the Portland metro area. And that congestion, if we don't act now, will probably grow to about, make sure I get it right, 69 hours a year being stuck in congestion in our area. We're also experiencing about $500 million per year shortfall just to maintain the existing system that we have. So we have some significant challenges and some significant funding gaps to meet those challenges. We also have been experiencing a pandemic, and of course during the first few months of the pandemic in the spring of 2020, we all saw the transportation congestion issues sort of disappear for a few months. But if anybody's been out driving around lately, you will notice that those congestion issues have come right back online, and our data indicates that they are at about pre-pandemic levels. So congestion is back and is continuing to increase. So in the end, ODOT recognizes that we really can't just solve the problems that we have in our community with just asphalt and concrete. The Urban Mobility Office specifically is set with the opportunity and bandwidth to intentionally address the biggest challenges of our day through transportation solutions. Challenges like equity that have occurred due to systemic racism. Challenges like greenhouse gas emissions that are rising every day. Challenges like congestion, whether we're stuck in traffic in a car or while we're riding transit. Challenges in safety, especially for pedestrians, as well as challenges funding the improvements that we need to be able to grow. So here's a look at the improvements that the Urban Mobility Office is coordinating. And as you may or may not be able to see at the scale, they include a lot more than just asphalt and concrete. It's truly a comprehensive approach to managing congestion and finding transportation solutions for our communities. The projects on this map include projects that are coordinated by the Urban Mobility Office, including the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, that's a bi-state program that we work closely with, as well as the I-5 Rose Quarter project up at the north. And then the Oregon 217 program out west on 217, down all the way south to the Boone Bridge project south of Wilsonville. On 205, we also have, of course, the I-205 Abernethy Bridge I-205 improvements project, which actually extends from 10th Street to Stafford Road. OR 213 to Stafford Road. So we all know what happens if we don't act. The investments in the Portland metro area over the last 20 to 30 years have led us to where we are with the congestion issues that we're experiencing today. If we don't act, we all know that congestion is going to continue to get worse to that 69 hours of congestion stuck in congestion per year. We're going to have increased delays to our deliveries. Our community members are going to have even more limited access to employment opportunities. We're going to end up spending more time stuck in traffic, and we are going to continue to increase greenhouse gas emissions. We're also going to see increased issues related to safety and the impacts especially that we're having to pedestrians and bicyclists. And finally, we will not be able to fund the investments that we need to help grow this community in a comprehensive way. But luckily, here today, we are here to talk about what we are doing and how we are acting. And our first act of the comprehensive congestion solutions is to construct the I-5 Abernethy Bridge project. And so with that, I'll turn it to my colleague, Alan Hendy, who will take you through the details of this exciting project. Alan?
All right, thanks, Della. All right, well, my name's Alan Hendy, and I'm a resident engineer for the Urban Mobility Office and the project manager for this exciting I-205 improvements project, and what will be the first construction project out of the gates, the Abernethy Bridge. So, all right. Well, I think, you know, as Della mentioned, and I think most of you have probably experienced, you've driven the I-205 corridor out here from Oregon City down to I-5, and everyone knows it's the last two-lane section of the interstate in the area, and it's highly congested. There's, you know, up to 7 hours of traffic and congestion per day, depending on, you know, if you're going in the morning or the afternoon. And this leads to a high number of accidents as well. So during our, during the study period that we looked at, there's, almost 900 crashes in this two-lane section of I-205. And a lot of them are focused right around the interchanges on either side of the Abernethy Bridge. These crashes have a high societal cost. And as you can see on the slide, almost $11 million in cost to society for injuries, project or property damage, and delays from these accidents themselves. The other big need for this project is seismic upgrades for bridges. The bridges throughout this corridor are highly susceptible to earthquakes, and they're vulnerable. They're really vulnerable to catastrophic damage if we don't do something about them. So that's where the need of this first part of the overall congestion management plan that Della mentioned. That's where the need for this project comes in. So what are the benefits of the 205 improvements project? Well, one of the goals is to help improve the economy. That's one of the major goals, for a lot of the projects that ODOT does, is looking at helping, how do we help improve the economy in the area? Well, to do that, you have to provide a reliable and safe transportation plan and network that looks at all modes of transportation. And so that's kind of what we're doing with this project. To provide earthquake-ready bridges, that's one of the main benefits that we're going to get out of this when we're done with this corridor. And to do that, we have to either replace them or upgrade them. This entire corridor has been designated as a critical life corridor so that emergency responders can respond in the event of an earthquake or a natural disaster. And so this is one step closer to making the entire corridor be able to provide that benefit to all the residents in the Portland metro area. Looking at another benefit of lowering the crash rate, reducing those crashes is an important safety function of this project. To do so, we have to look at the interchanges, we have to look at the on and off ramps and the different access points throughout the corridor. And so that's what we're looking at as part of this project, is improving the interchanges and the travel and the congestion through those heavily traveled interchanges during the peak hours. Reducing the congestion and travel times is another huge benefit of this project. So, being able to know that you can drive from one end to the other, and it's going to take you a certain amount of time, no matter what time of day it is an important feature of a transportation system. And to do that, we're going to add a travel lane in each direction, and so that will help accomplish that goal for us. And really, what we're looking at there is almost 4 3/4 hours of reduced congestion per day when the corridor is completely built out. So on this slide here, this shows really the overall improvements for the I-205 improvements project. And on the left side over here, you've got Stafford Road. And then over on the right here, you've got Oregon 213. And so this entire corridor is part of the program. And it's been split into 3 phases. The first phase of construction was actually completed in 2020. And I think if you drive the corridor today, you'll see there's 5 traveler information signs that have been installed. And so that was the first kind of initial phase of the project. Phase 2 is what we're calling from over at Stafford Road to 10th Street at Westland there. And so that phase of the project is a little further out and includes some bridge replacements and bridge upgrades and 2 sound walls. Phase 1 is really what the team has been focused on this last couple of years, and how that's going to be packaged for construction. And as you can see on the slide, there's 4 different colors here. Those are the kind of 4 different packages that we're looking at right now. And the first one that we're super excited about, which is going to be going to construction soon, is Phase 1A, which is the Abernethy Bridge structure itself. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about what's in that in just a second. So, but that's the overall map for the project area. So, how does this break down by the numbers? As I mentioned, it's about 7 miles of improvements to the interstate. That's a lot of lane miles there when you look at an interstate improvement project. There's going to be 2 improved interchanges as well. That's at Oregon 43 and at Oregon 99. And when it's all said and done, there'll be 7 new traveler information signs throughout the entire corridor. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to be adding 1 new travel lane in each direction, along with some auxiliary lanes between the interchanges themselves. And then there's 9 bridges. One of those is the Abernethy Bridge that are going to be seismically upgraded and retrofitted to withstand a major earthquake event. There's 3 new sound walls, which were all voted on by the residents of West Linn and Oregon City. And then there's 5 locations throughout the project corridor that include active transportation improvements. And so those benefit bikes and peds and look at the different modes of transportation. So here's phase 1A. This is kind of the cornerstone of the improvement project, I would say. And it's what we're going out to construction with this next year. So it includes work on both sides of the bridge. So we're going to be doing work at Oregon 99 and doing work at Oregon 43 as well. On the West Linn side at Oregon 43, we'll be installing a roundabout and reconfiguring the interchange. And so part of that reconfiguration gets rid of this northbound on-ramp to 205 and puts all of the access into one location, which helps reduce the congestion throughout that part of the corridor. On the Oregon City side, we're doing improvements to 99 itself. We're reconfiguring some of the ramps, and we're providing improved and upgraded pedestrian facilities as well along that side. The bridge itself is getting widened, and as you can imagine, when you widen a structure like that across a river, it's a massive undertaking. So that's going to be a challenging part of the project, but we've got some good plans, and we've done a lot of outreach to the construction industry and the construction community to get feedback on how to have a really good project. So I think Della mentioned we're not just, we don't just do concrete and asphalt. We're not just a highway division. We look at all modes of transportation. So part of the active transportation that we're focusing on as part of this project includes 6 different areas throughout the project. 3 of those are being constructed within phase 1 that we're going out to construction with this year, and they include pedestrian. New multi-use pedestrian paths on both sides of the river, improved crossings with flashing beacons, and improved sidewalks and ADA connections as well. So as you can imagine, with a construction project like this of this scale, there's going to be impacts. There's just really no way around building a project like this without impacts. And so we have a whole team dedicated to looking at how are we going to handle communicating these impacts, and what's our outreach going to look like. And so we're developing a really robust communication plan for the construction period. We expect construction to start next summer of 2022. And because of the work that has to occur in the water, it's going to take 4 years. And so we'll be wrapping that up in 2025 for this first phase. We expect there'll be nightly lane closures throughout the length of the project. Some seasons, those lane closures will be more frequent, and some seasons there won't be hardly any at all. And so that's where our team is going to be working closely with the contractor to determine exactly what those impacts are, when they are, and then get that communication out to the public. As I mentioned, to widen a bridge like the Abernethy, it's very challenging, and part of the plan for widening this particular structure is going to be actually moving the structure physically outwards to provide the space to do the widening. In order to move an entire structure, you have to close the whole freeway down. So there will be some full weekend closures anticipated at some point during the project, and those will include regional detours and local detours as well. we've been working really closely with city staff. I see there's some of the Oregon City staff here, but we've been working with city staff from both Oregon City and Westland to identify what the best routes are, what those impacts look like, and how to mitigate some of those impacts as well. So, as I mentioned, we've got a team that's dedicated to coming up with a communication plan. We've already developed some tools that we've been using to communicate updates on the project, and we're looking at developing even more tools as we move towards the construction phase. Some of those tools include, we have a really informative project website that I would encourage you to go check out if you haven't looked at it already. But it will have weekly updates and include all of the traffic information that anybody needs to know about the project. We're looking at a variety of social media platforms to get the information out and get real-time updates out to residents and the traveling public through the area. And then we've got a newsletter that we're going to be sending out as well, and that's actually going to be part of a bigger urban mobility newsletter that's coming up here soon as well. We'll be providing a hotline with information so people can call in and get up-to-date information, or leave a message and contact information and with a concern, and somebody will get back to you. And then we've got also a long list of stakeholder emails that we send out regular updates. And one of the new, one of the ways that we're super excited about communicating these project updates is our text alerts. And so over here you can see, and I hope you can see it, but I-205corridor.org is the project website, and you can go there to find out information, sign up for any of these updates and alerts. And I think Della is going to share some more information on how to connect with us later on. So in line with Oregon's strategic action plan, one of the things we're looking at doing, as I mentioned earlier, is how do we improve the economy? How do we make it more equitable to all Oregonians? And so this project is really focused on being one of those catalysts that help improve the economy in the area and increase the workforce. As Della will talk about in a little bit, we just had this big infrastructure bill, and we've already got a worker shortage, and so I feel like we've done everything we can to try to look at creative ways to solve this on a project level basis. And so these are just a few of the ideas that we're implementing. And we're going to be partnering with our contractor on all of these to help increase the workforce in the area and increase the knowledge and skills and ability of the workers that may not be in the construction industry and want to get in there. And so the first one is looking at how do we help the disadvantaged businesses in the area. And so we've established a 14% goal on that criteria that we expect the contractor to meet. We're looking at improving the on-the-job training and apprenticeship as well, and so we've set a goal of 20% for that. And then obviously the aspirational targets for improving the minority and female participation and providing those opportunities for those groups has also been set and will be something that we're working with our contractor on trying to achieve. And then the zip code priority hiring is a brand new program that we've been working with Federal Highways on, and that program targets specific zip codes based on a socioeconomic study that was performed, and looks and encourages the contractor to look for apprentices and journeymen and supervisors from those zip codes, and they can meet any of those criteria out of those zip codes, and so they complement each other. This is the first time it'll be used in the country. It's a brand new pilot program that they just came out with. The Federal Highways came out with this last year. So we're excited about working with our contractor on that. We've also been working with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde to establish a TARO goal on this project because they have kind of overlapping jurisdiction within this project area as well. And so those are all the examples of how we're trying to improve the workforce and improve the economy for the local area on a project level. So here's kind of the overall I-205 project timelines. And as I mentioned, you can see the I-205, the phase 1 will be starting construction this summer, and that's kind of shown right here. And then there's a lot of other work happening on all the other phases, and the timing of all those we still haven't quite figured out yet, but we've got teams working on that. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Della now to talk about how the timeline for the toll projects fits in with the rest of the work.
Thank you, Alan. All right, so I'm just gonna ask, can everyone see the slides okay, or are you able to refer to your packets, I hope? I assume this will be sent around. I know it's a little bit difficult to see, so hopefully we can answer questions as we get into this. So one of the things I hope I can point out here, and it may or may not, is really the final environmental document for the I-205 toll project. So that document is expected around the end of 2022. And on the I-205 improvements project, we have the Phase 1A Abernethy Bridge package going to bid and starting construction in 2022, right here, and happening before that environmental decision is made, but with the anticipation of that project going forward. You'll notice that the rest of the packages for Phase 1 and all the construction for Phase 2 are scheduled to happen after that environmental document. And the reason for that timing is really because we wanted to be able to act now to start construction of Abernethy Bridge right away, but we don't want to overextend our funding limits until we have some assurance on the environmental document for the toll program to be able to fund the rest of the phases of the project. So as I was alluding to here, the toll revenue will be needed to not only pay for the future phases, but also to pay back the funds that are being borrowed through House Bill 35's funding flexibility. That's the expectation of that particular bit of legislation. And so we're proceeding with the I-205 toll project in order to be able to fulfill that direction. I know, I know everybody's been seeing a lot of coverage in the media lately about the infrastructure bill, which is amazing, significant, certainly the first time in my career, probably the first time in my life that an infusion of transportation dollars has been made at this level by our federal partners. If you've also been reading, our Assistant Director of Finance and Revenue, Travis Brower, has been out talking with the media. And although there are tons of dollars coming to Oregonians for many, many different programs, from charging stations to transit to other sorts of transportation investments, the discretionary dollars that are being allotted to Oregon at this time are not enough to pay for the improvements of the 7-mile 205 project by our initial analysis. And I know there are many webinars that have been posted that Travis and his team are putting out to go in more detail on those documents. And I'd also offer that hopefully in the future, if this group is interested, we can have someone from Travis's shop come to talk in more detail about those options. But the webinars are recorded and are available as we speak. I think it's also worth noting that just because we don't have all the money right now, the ODOT team is still working and looking for funding opportunities for this program so that we can, of course, always looking for ways to diversify our finance plan to deliver the 7-mile improvement and looking for ways to be competitive. Getting this first phase of Abernethy Bridge out on the street is one of the ways that we're putting our best foot forward in order to be competitive for any federal grants that continue to come out of reconciliation or other opportunities. But even if we did have enough money to pay for Rose Quarter, 217, Boone Bridge, and the 205 project, the legislature and the state have been very clear that the direction to ODOT is to implement tolling. And the purpose for that is really about not just raising revenue, but also managing congestion. Really, the toll rate is the tool that we have to manage the dials of congestion. If we put the price too high, then we won't have enough users and we'll create a ton of diversion. And if we put it too low, we won't be able to manage congestion either. So it's really about finding that sweet spot, and we truly are in the very beginning stages through the environmental document to identify where is that sweet spot, what are the impacts, and how can we really come up with a solution that's right for this community and right for the state of Oregon. This is one of my favorite slides, and a slide I wish I had about a year ago. My mom lives in Canby, and she asked me the question, and I find my family members to be pretty difficult folks to have conversations about tolling with, so I appreciate those conversations. And my mom was asking, well, gosh, you know, where's the toll plaza going to be? How are you going to find workers? How much change should I have in my car? Because I remember tolls when I was a kid and certain parts of the country traveling around with my parents. We really wish I had this slide. And as you can see here, the toll booths are meant to be all electronic. There's a picture up in the upper left that shows a transponder. It's about the size of a Band-Aid going right behind the rear view mirror. And that transponder is for the Hood River Bridge here in Oregon. And all of the equipment that's on that toll gantry is set up to either pick up your transponder and charge your account for the trip that you're taking, or if you don't have a transponder, you would have your license plate photographed, and a bill would be sent to you later on that you could go online and pay later. So the other big question right now is how much will tolls cost, and I can tell you that we're a couple of years out from knowing how much the tolls will cost, at least a couple of years. And we're really early in this process, but the toll, again, has to manage that sweet spot. It has to not only manage congestion, but also raise enough revenue. And the details that go into that kind of work include a lot of traffic modeling that we're undergoing through the environmental process that's happening for the 205 project, again, set to be concluded towards the end of 2022. The other fundamental tenet of our toll program in Oregon is that you'll only pay for what you use. Or, like, as I like to say, you only pay for the trip you take. So if in the future, once the regional mobility project is up and running, maybe I'd be in Wilsonville and want to go to Lake Oswego, I might hop on I-5 North, head over to 205 North, get off at Stafford Road, and head up to Lake Oswego. I would have made about a 12-mile trip. 7 of those miles would have been on the interstate. I would be charged to the tolls for that section of the interstate. I would not pay, for instance, for Abernethy Bridge to take that trip. I would be paying for the trip I take. And then finally, there also has to be low-income considerations. The Oregon toll program is meant to be an equitable toll program, and in House Bill 3055, the legislature directed ODOT to take a deep look at what low-income considerations could be. So luckily, the agency was pursuing the toll program with equity in mind, and established the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee, I believe in early 2020. And that group has been working for over a year now at looking at different ways to ensure that equity is included at the beginning of the Oregon toll program, not as an afterthought after we implement tolling. That toll committee we're looking forward to investigate the low-income considerations assignment from our legislature, as well as to provide recommendations to the Oregon Transportation Commission. As you can see here, we have 4 commissioners, and 1 new commissioner will be joining us in January. But these commissioners, all 5 commissioners, represent the Oregon Toll Authority. They have the final say on the rates. The EMAC will, of course, continue their work and provide recommendations to this committee. We expect that the rates for the Oregon toll program and collections to begin occurring on the 205 project in about end of 24. So we would be looking for rates to be set sometime about 6 to 9 months before we start collecting tolls. And so by that schedule, we're looking at setting rates somewhere in mid-2024, which again, we would still be required and expected by our commission to complete a robust public input process in order to inform the recommendations to the commission. And you all will have opportunities to comment on those toll rates months before those rates are set by this toll authority. So as you can see here, the I-205 toll project is, has the exact same limits as the I-205 construction project. The tolls paid on the I-205 toll program will go for construction on the I-205 construction project, the improvements project. So the tolls that you're paying in that corridor are going to the improvements on that corridor. We've also heard loud and clear for the last couple of years the significant concerns around diversion. We know that diversion is real. We know that it's happening right now due to the level of congestion on the 205 corridor, that folks are diverting and coming into the local system and expanding gridlock on the local streets. I think up here it says we have negative diversion. And that's the kind of diversion I think most of us are talking about. There's also positive diversion, like the diversion we experienced right at the beginning of the pandemic, where most folks were teleworking and making different choices than getting in their cars and using the system. When we talk about congestion pricing, we're really talking about getting a small number of folks who have the opportunity to make different choices to make those choices so that we can have, the rest of the folks can have more reliable trips. We also understand that an equitable toll program includes robust transit to complement an equitable toll program, so providing transportation options for everyone. And to that end, we're partnering early and often with all of our transit partners from TriMet, C-Trans, SMART, Canby Transit, Clackamas Community College, and other partners to really understand what are the impacts, what are the opportunities, and how can we support and partner with these folks on a robust investment in transportation options to complement the congestion management system. We are also been doing a ton of public outreach over the last couple of years. Hopefully many of you have had a chance to talk with the Oregon Toll Program Director Lucinda Broussard in many different venues. And if not, we will continue over the next year to have these sorts of conversations. We are very early in the game on the toll program. We are including and bringing everyone under the tent. We want to be vulnerable. We want to tell you what we know right now, what might not be fully cooked, because it's going to take all of us to get this right. None of us here at ODOT think we have it right, but we're definitely interested in getting it right. And we're not going to be able to do that and set up a toll program that works for Oregonians without your input and engagement. So thank you again for having us here today for this conversation, as well as we hope you'll continue to follow these programs and provide us your thoughts and feedback. So there's ways to get involved. We have a newsletter for the toll program that will be in your packet, as well as the I-205 Improvements Project has a website and places where you can sign up during the construction of Abernethy for real-time text updates. Finally, want to make sure that you all know that I-205 toll program is not going it alone. It's going first, because we are looking for the opportunity to act now by building the Abernethy Bridge now. The Regional Mobility Pricing Project is currently scheduled to be coming online and collecting tolls towards the end of '25. So we will hopefully be seeing the regional mobility collections coming forward before the full construction of the 7-mile 205 program. So we are working fast and furious on both of these programs. You can, again, visit us by going to OregonTolling.org, visiting I-205corridor.org, or following us, for those of you who are tweeters, on the Urban Mobility tweet channel, which is at Urban Mobility OFC. And so with that, Alan and I and Matt stand ready to take your feedback, comments, and questions. And again, thank you for having us here today.
Well, thank you, Dylan. We appreciate all of the slides. Alan and Matt, thank you for also participating in the presentation. For those of you that did have a little bit of a challenge reading a lot of the detail in the slides, you're not alone. But look on the tables, and there is a very illustrative fact sheet here that you can go ahead and take home with you that'll outline a lot of the information that was shared by Della and Alan today. So be sure and have that with you because we want to make sure you've got the accurate information. So we do have a few questions, and this is when the real fun begins, folks.
Let's do it.
Where they say the rubber meets the road. Okay. Let's see what we've got. According to a recent pamphlet media report, Oregon will receive $1.6 billion from the recently approved infrastructure bill by Congress. How much of that money will be available immediately, and how quickly must it be spent in order to not have it returned to the federal government as unused funds?
That's a great question. I don't have all the details on exactly how the 1.6 billion is going, and again, I would defer to our finance and revenue folks who are at the tip of the spear in processing that information. However, I can say, and I'm really repeating Travis's remarks, I think in one of the local media, which is that about 400 million of those dollars are available as discretionary dollars. And again, those, even if we diverted all 400 million to the 205 project, that would be not enough to construct just this program, let alone all the other needs in the Portland metro area. I'll also offer up that in my experience, I've been with ODOT for 12 years now almost, and coming from other states, ODOT is what we call a receiving state. So ODOT does I think, and I'll try to be objective here, a great job of having projects ready for additional federal funds. So if another state doesn't meet their timing obligations, we usually have some backlog that we can enact right away, and our federal partners who need that money obligated will often come to us and ask us for that assistance. We are required to act really quickly in those circumstances, but it would be the first time in my career that we did not take advantage of an infusion of federal dollars. I think it's more of how quickly can we get it more than any concerns about us not being able to spend it with the needs that we have.
Okay. Following up on the report that Travis did, because I had an opportunity to watch that myself, he also alluded to $100 billion being available in federal grants. And in order to be eligible, or at least to have a better chance of receiving a portion of that $100 billion, they were going to be looking at state projects that had matching funds. The Rose Quarter was mentioned over and over and over again during that presentation as probably being the best choice or best opportunity to be able to go forward because the state has already allotted so much matching or funding for that improvement. What would have to happen for I-205 to also have matching funds from the state government to be eligible for those $100 billion in federal grants?
It's a great question, thank you. I think in the case of the Rose Quarter, there are some funds coming forward that are specific and new, and those dollars in that program, which I think we won't understand the full magnitude until reconciliation is completed, but some of those dollars are really meant for projects that address historic harms to the BIPOC community. So in the case of Rose Quarter, that's a very specifically a specific project that would probably be one of our best candidates to move forward for that particular program. I am guessing as we see reconciliation and more information becomes available, we will again peel through that, look for opportunities. Every option that we have, the team has pursued for federal grants up to this point for the last 4 years that we've been working on this program, and we will continue to do so at every available opportunity, look for those federal dollars. However, all forecasts at this point still indicate that some level of tolling would be needed in order to pay for the 205 program, even if we were successful with anticipated programs that might be coming forward. And again, I will note that even if we did have all the dollars to make all of these modernization improvements in the Portland metro area, we would be missing the assignment to use tolling as a congestion management tool.
And as a follow-up to that, Dylan, You mentioned we need to go ahead and implement tolling in order to pay for the I-205 infrastructure improvements. What provision in the programs that ODOT and the U.S. Department of Transportation is looking at, because it's an interstate freeway, to sunset those tolls once those improvements have been paid for? What confidence does the communities have that those tolls just won't stay there?
Well, that's a great question, and I want to be transparent and honest with you. The plan is not to sunset the tolls. The tolls, the 205 toll program will be enacted early so that we can act now and build the Abernethy Bridge. Then the plan is for the regional mobility pricing project to come online, and that program will stay in place for the foreseeable future. I think projections into 2060 at this point that I've seen right now. And again, the purpose of that program is to stay in place to be able to manage congestion while still raising revenue to fund other improvements. The improvements that we've shown on this map are really the improvements we think we can fund in the next 10 or 15 years or so. And we anticipate there will continue to be future needs for operations and maintenance, as well as other investments along the corridor.
Oh, thank you. That's
Yep.
good to know. Obviously, people here in Oregon City have a concern that cars will divert off of I-205 and take the Oregon City Westland Arch Bridge, take 99E to go ahead in McLaughlin to get into downtown Portland or wherever they might be going. What studies, if any, have been started yet to analyze what those impacts will be on local city streets?
That's a great question, and I appreciate it the most because I get to phone a friend now and invite Matt Delata from WSP, who is the consultant, leading the consultant team that's overseeing our traffic studies. I could certainly paraphrase, but I really want you to have the information from the guy who's living it day to day. So Matt, you want to take a stab?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so we are in the midst of the analysis of the traffic. There's really, this may be more detailed than some of you want, but there's really kind of three layers to the traffic modeling that we do for this. There's the regional layer, that's kind of the highest level, and that's looking at the multimodal trip demand, how the shifts over the course of a day, and sort of the big picture changes. And then we do kind of a sub-area model, which we created specifically for this project to figure out how do the traffic patterns change, because the big concern here isn't on the kind of demand side, that beneficial diversion that Della talked about, it's what's that rerouting. So we refine that analysis, particularly for the peak hours, because the peak hours are where we have the most congestion. So if you drive across the Arch Bridge right now, you see that. You can't really, you're not getting all the cars through. It's very congested. So this model kind of treats that with more accuracy. And then the third and final level is to look at specific intersections and locations. There are mobility standards defined by ODOT and other agencies that are the minimum performance that these intersections have to achieve. Some of them don't achieve them today, and then there are plans in place for that. But we'll go down to that in this project, to that very detailed level analysis as well. So any impacts from the project in terms of traffic getting rerouted and ending up on a different surface street, that gets assessed in our analysis. So we're in the early stages of that. We're looking at the long-term needs. We're looking out to 2045, the growth that's going to happen in this region, in this area, and the increasing car trips that'll come. We're looking at that right now. So that's the piece we've done, the sort of 25 regional level analysis. What does it look like if we don't take action? What does it look like if we do take action? And then that more detailed, that more refined piece that I mentioned, we're kind of in the process still doing that. So I don't have all the answers for you for that, but Della mentioned the transparency. So we're trying to share information along the way as we kind of develop it and go. Hopefully I didn't put you to sleep, but.
You might want to stick around.
Okay.
We're not going to let you off the hot seat that easy.
Sure.
All right, let's see what we've got here. Are there any Oregon transportation projects that have already been chosen by ODOT and or the U.S. Department of Transportation that will receive funding? And if so, what are they?
So again, this is really work that Travis's shop has been doing. In the Urban Mobility Office, we have an intimate knowledge of the projects that we're coordinating and leading. But I would be remiss to try to generate that list. We can certainly get that information for this group. I know that there is a list that I've heard about that is already mostly ready to go, with probably some other opportunities to come up or generate leverage for some new opportunities that might not have been contemplated before the money came this way. But again, it sounds like a really good opportunity for us to have Travis's team check in with this group.
Okay. Let's see. How will the decisions be made on what projects receive funding? Will there be any public input and involvement allowed in this process, which you've already addressed, if there will be? And when will those meetings start to occur?
So is that question about toll program or about the infrastructure bill, or?
Yeah, I think basically just transportation improvements in general here in the metro region.
Sure, absolutely. So for the infrastructure bill, as those projects start to come to light, and I'm in my experience working with ODOT and Bend, I was an area manager working with the local agencies. Typically, the process would be working with the local agencies, the area commissions on transportation, to solidify the list with a lot of public input, sort through that list, make a recommendation to the Oregon Transportation Commission, allow public comment on those recommendations, much like we go through for the STIP process. I believe the infrastructure bill programming process will follow a very similar process that we go through for our statewide transportation improvement program. For the toll funds for the I-205 toll project, like I said, all those funds go directly to the 205 improvements project, the 7 miles between Stafford Road and OR 213. For the rest of the program and improvements, that will also go through a public process. We at ODOT, as we fund the regional toll programs, they would go through an MTIP amendment. They would go through an RTP process. So which is in Metro, and Metro includes all of the local agencies and counties in this area. And I know there's some at least former JPAC members here, which is the policy committee for Metro, and that group will come together and decide, yes, does this fit with what we want for our region? Is it the right kind of project? Do we have the right kind of funding? And those sorts of investments will go through that process, as well as the Oregon Transportation Commission process, which is the statewide approval of programming funds as well before any project is selected and sent off to design and delivery.
All right, well, let's stay on tolling for one more question. I think that's why a lot of people are here today. Recognizing that a lot of people use I-205 that live here in our local communities as really the only way to get across the Lima River. Whether it's just to visit their family, visit friends, do local shopping, or just run errands. And I know that you're going to be analyzing how to price the tolls based upon different criteria. Will there be a means test if the grandparents who are on Social Security are not making very much income annually? Would they still, but let's say they're driving from Tualatin all the way to Happy Valley to visit their grandkids, would they get a reduced toll as compared to a commercial trucker?
That's a great question. And I really appreciate it, because it is a passion of our office. We don't want to just enact a toll program. We want to enact an equitable toll program, not just a facility that works for people of means, but a facility that works for everyone. And when we talk about the demographic that you're mentioning, I'd say my mom's in that demographic. That's part of the legislature's guidance and noting that sort of an issue and what we as Oregonians want to see. We want to see our grandparents being able to travel to see their grandkids. And so in order to do that, that's why we have a report that's due to the legislature to talk about an income-based toll rate. And so, of course, there's a lot of details that go into how does the traffic modeling work, how does the pricing come out. We can't give everyone a reduced rate, or we'll still have the same situation we have right now as far as congestion goes. But how do we really make sure that we're not disproportionately impacting folks who don't have the same means as some other folks do? So it's a really important tenet of the work that we're doing We're very focused on it. Again, I'll say the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee is the first of its kind in the country where we're implementing equity before we start to collect the first toll, whereas in almost every other area, they implement tolling and then look at ways to address the inequity issues. So we really are trying to be forward thinking in this area and really appreciate the direction from the legislature, putting a fine point on that and requiring that report within this next year. So none of us, I think, are going to feel good if we open up a toll program that causes more harm than good.
Glad to hear that, because I drive across that bridge a lot. So a comment you made earlier, Della, was that because of congestion management pricing, the tolls will not sunset, meaning they're going to stay in place forever until something happens that causes them to go away. Once the cost for all the infrastructure improvements is completed, though, wouldn't it make sense that the price of the tolls would go down, and or maybe only one lane, an express lane? So if someone wants to pay extra premium to be able to bypass the rest of the traffic, that not all the lanes would have to be tolled?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and luckily with the Oregon Transportation Commission being our toll authority, in my world, I'm generally focused on the next 10 or 15 years and what that looks like and how we can get those projects built and underway. But it is a great question. In 15 years, do we need to reassess the toll rates? There will be periodic reassessment of the rates to check to see, gosh, did we set it right to pay for what we're trying to do in the first 15 years? And what adjustments might be needed. That'll be a public process, and the commission will make those changes. I think as we go forward, you're absolutely right. Well, the system will need to be set up to be nimble and respond to the actual needs of the system. We don't need to collect more than we need to take care of the facility. We've already made the policy decision that the revenue on the corridor stays on the corridor. So the monies that are spent through the Regional Mobility Pricing Project won't be going to places all over the state. It will be staying there to create improvements on that corridor. So I think we will be setting that up through policy conversations. Again, we're very early, haven't completed the environmental process, which in engineered speak is the pre-design phase. And so we're really in the pre-design phase looking at these big policy questions. And again, if we look at 2024-ish is when toll rate setting for 205 would happen, we have more than a couple years to get into all of these details. So we're contemplating those issues. And I invite you again to watch us closely and track us and be engaged as we go through those policy conversations.
We will.
Good.
Especially this group. I
All
won't
right.
read all the cards. But I'll just say, especially this group. Some of the comments. Okay, let's see. A White House fact sheet recently released states that Oregon will receive approximately $5.36 billion from several sources. This includes $3.4 billion from the reauthorization and increases in the Federal Highway Trust Fund and $747 million in public transit investments. Can any of these funds be used to pay for the matching requirements to be eligible for the $100 billion grants, federal grants, for the widening of I-205?
So typically when we apply for a federal grant, the match that they want is a state match, not another federal match. So we would have to look for state dollars to make those matches. Again, I think for every opportunity that we have to apply for one of those grants, I believe you'll see the I-205 team looking to apply for those opportunities once reconciliation is completed and we have a better idea of which particular programs this project might be competitive for. We've already invested state dollars just to get the design for the Abernethy Bridge to the place that it is right now, and would be able to use the tens of millions that we've spent on design with state dollars to help support those applications as we have for previous applications in the past for the FAST Act sort of grants, the Tiger grants, and those sort of programs that we've applied for in the past.
All right, Bill, did you want to talk a little bit about the legislation you want to introduce?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
No. You need to stand up here, though.
Can you use your mic?
Yeah.
Okay.
But in order to be in the camera,
Yeah. You know, I have decided to introduce some legislation in February, and it has to do with the issue of diversion. The study indicates that approximately 99E would see increased traffic for people avoiding the toll of about 40% increase. 40%. And that's created quite a stir. And I've been getting lots of phone calls and lots of action. I think we need to talk about this issue, and we need to think about it very seriously. So I'll be introducing in February at the session a bill to require that there be voting of those people impacted in a 15-mile radius of the toll to approve or disapprove of the toll. I think it's an important issue, and since we're going to be the first people to receive this, and you think about what that does, 40% on McLaughlin, that's the one for which I have data. There are going to be others as well, so I think it's a big issue. And I think this is a good way to have a conversation in a much broader context instead of just among a few different groups. Thank you.
okay. Thank you. Appreciate the comments there, Bill. So another question is, there's been this, we're going to kind of deep, or did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just wondering if I'm off the hook.
Nobody's off the hook. Let me excuse you. You've been watching the trials on TV lately. You're in the witness stand. You have not been excused. So there's also been conversations about a pedestrian bike bridge connecting Westland and Oregon City. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that because your main focus is on I-205. Do you have any comments as to whether that would be included in the infrastructure bill as a transportation improvement?
Well, I can always comment. I think, so our Region 1 partners are working on that particular opportunity, I think with our Oregon City and Clackamas County friends. And again, in my experience working at ODOT, we're pretty ambitious and interested in applying for any and all federal grants that we can get. And I think once, I haven't personally had a chance to fully review the bill and obviously the reconciliation could have some very good nuggets in there once that becomes available. But especially in the bike ped multimodal arena, it seems like there's a lot more opportunities than we've ever had before to fund those programs. And I know that our Region 1 folks and certainly Urban Mobility Office would be wanting to help and assist with any opportunities to help provide, again, more modes, more easily accessible modes for folks not just to get along the interstate system, but be able to safely get around the communities.
Okay. I'll let you stay there, Della.
Okay.
Since it is an interstate freeway system, I'm glad you mentioned that in your comments just now. Why is it that just a small portion of the interstate freeways are being tolled and not the entire stretch from the Oregon California border to wherever?
It's a great question. Right now, we have support from the legislature and through House Bill 2017. This was the region and area we were directed to look at implementing tolls. So, it's also, again, a reflection of the conversations that happened through the Governor's Transportation Visioning Panel in 15 and what the impacts of the congestion in the Portland metro area are to everyone across the state. I know that there's congestion in Bend, there's congestion in Eugene, there's congestion in all sorts of different areas of our state. But right now, this is the highest and most critical area from a statewide perspective for us to look at managing congestion. And I do imagine that the Urban Mobility Office, which is a statewide office, would be able to use the tools and lessons learned here to help solve congestion management issues in other parts of the state in partnership with the local agencies and the ODOT regions that are working in those areas. From multimodal investments or partnering opportunities, we're still learning a lot about the STIF money, which is the transit investment money that came through House Bill 2017, and refining how those funds can best be used. And we'll continue to look for opportunities to address congestion in other areas as we are able to move on from solving this big one in front of us here where we are.
Okay. And I'm not sure I'm going to be able to read every word here, but regarding I-5 and the Albina neighborhoods, according to the 2020 census, shows that 20 to 30% of the people that living there have left their communities. Are you concerned about people leaving other communities that are negatively impacted either by diversion or by having to pay the tolls?
Sure, absolutely. As we saw on one of the slides, it showed with the widening wealth gap that continues to occur across our country, the number one issue is housing, and the second issue is transportation that's affecting folks' ability to stay and live where they want to stay and live and work. So again, it's a big part of why everything that we're doing has to be looked at through an equity lens. The way of constructing interstate systems of the past, where we put it where it's easiest and the most logical for a lot of us engineers, is not necessarily a good transportation solution for a community. And so it's really in the details of how it affects housing, how it affects the ability for people to get to school or get to work. It's more than just, the interstate system for us is the catalyst, but we're really interested in providing transportation solutions for the community. And that will truly be our metric of whether we're successful in 10 or 15 years, and we look back at the work we've done here. And again, I'll point back to that, and the only way we can do that, Alan and I can come up with a super efficient, logical transportation solution, but one that works for the community can only come from input and collaboration with the community.
A lot of information there, a lot to digest. Well, that's the end of our questions, unless somebody else raised their hand. Mark?
Yeah. Thank you, Ken.
Oh,
Thank
come
you.
on, hey, for our audience.
One of my questions was related just what Kent was asking about the Albina community. When I-5 was built originally, they cut right through the middle of the neighborhoods there, and our African-American population. And my question is, over the last 20 years, those families have been displaced, they've moved, it's been gentrified, but the issue is now they're coming back saying, well, we need to make this community whole, we're going to put a cap on I-5 and make more housing. My question is, who's it going to benefit? Is it going to benefit the BIPOC or Black and African American communities, or our white, wealthy new homeowners in those communities? So I think that equity lens may be looking backwards and not forward on who is currently living there and who can afford to live there. And we're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to put those caps on to build more housing for more wealthy housing. So that bothers me. That's a question I have about that.
Well, thank you.
Those priorities.
Thank you for that question. So, on the solutions for the Rose Quarter project, ODOT stood up the Historic Albina Advisory Committee board, I think in early 21. And that board, in our deference, there are people who are from Albina, or generations of folks who were displaced from Albina, and people with the lived experience of the harms that were conducted by ODOT and by the city and by others in that particular area in the past. That community the project was always designed when it went through the planning documents as early as I think 14 to include covers, and the covers to make connection for lots of reasons. And those decisions were made without a group like the Historic Albina Advisory Board. And so the covers were always a part of the project to connect for bike peds, to restore that area, to be able for folks to be able to get around in their community safely. But what we have seen through bringing folks, and again in that community, providing that input and providing the opportunity to review several different alternatives, it was that board in that community that recommended eventually the hybrid scenario 3 that we're contemplating right now. So this is, again, of course, I would say that the 2014 solutions were more of our old ODOT process. where people like Alan and I get together and come up with some good solutions. So you want bikes, you want peds, we'll do this, we'll do that. But it wasn't until this last year that we brought forward the folks who have that lived experience to advise us on what is really meaningful for them, and to be able to take that information and then move it forward and really listen and implement. And for this community here, it'll be a different conversation of what matters and what the priorities and values are. And we want you to know that we're going to listen just as hard and care just as much about the impacts and vision that you have for your community in this area.
One last question.
Hello, Della. Good to see you again.
You too,
Paul
Commissioner.
Savis, Clackamas County Commissioner. You had one slide there, you showed up there about 3 times. It was this one with the circles with, climate and equity. Here's that one. And something that concerns me, and I mentioned this at JPAC with some of the metro priorities, you mentioned active amendments. There's this anti-road climate that is growing in the political world that we live in. And some of these folks are decision makers, and they're heavily influenced. What I think is missing up there, and I've pointed this out before, is economics, right? I mean, our interstate is really a corridor, our conduit for commerce. And I don't think that's really being factored in. My concern is that we're missing out on that, because in 20 years from now, our population is going to see substantial growth. We need the economy. We need to have the business services moving through that corridor to make our economy whole. And I'm concerned that it's more about reducing congestion and not investing in the roads, frankly, and adding the necessary capacity. I understand the climate issues, but in 20 years from now, I'm strongly believing there's going to be a lot more alternative fuel vehicles than ever before. And I just see a need that in 20, 30 years from now, most of the vehicles out there will not be propelled by fossil fuels, but we will still have the need to move goods and services. So I'm very concerned, and I don't know how much the priority that is for ODOT.
Well, I appreciate the question, Commissioner. I think, and certainly we can put a bigger highlight on this, but every time we talk about reliable trips, we're really singing the tune of our freight partners. They want reliable trips through the corridor. Right now, if you go through this particular area, like Alan mentioned, it's about 7 hours of congestion a day, so you have 24 minus 7. Not doing math really well right now. 17 hours a day that you can reliably get through this corridor, right? In the Rose Corridor, it's 12, so you only have half a day that you can get through that corridor in a reliable way. And what impact is that if you're long haul? My dad was a long haul truck driver. What's the impact when you get to Seattle? And so if I drive through Rose Corridor at midnight, but then I'm in Seattle during morning rush hour or those sorts of things, how do all of those things impact my ability to carry that product, and then how does that impact the prices that are coming your way? So again, as we talk about congestion management, we really are not just concerned, we are a transportation office, and we're interested in, again, helping folks all over the state get those products to market, get the freight through the corridor with reliable travel times. We are making strategic investments in bottleneck areas. We don't believe that just managing congestion in this area is going to solve the problem. We feel like there needs to be a strategic capacity improvement, but we're not also just widening the freeway wherever we can because we think that will solve the problem. We're trying to very strategically provide those investments, use the tolling program to manage that congestion, and provide a reliable travel trip for everybody coming through Oregon, especially folks trying to get their products to market. So I hope, and I'm happy to talk more offline with you, Commissioner. Appreciate all your questions and your engagement.
Okay, well, let's give a hand to Della and Alan and Matt here. You are very brave souls to respond to all those questions. I am totally impressed. But a lot of information to digest there, and obviously, as you can tell from what they shared, we're still at the very beginning stages in all this. There's a lot of analytics that's got to take place on the diversion and the impacts that it's going to have on local city streets. What's the most cost-efficient way to implement the tolling process? What is it going to cost at different times of the day? And I think we just have to stay tuned. And like everything else in your local community and region, participate. Everybody's going to be getting notices about workshops, webinars, forums, Zoom calls, to be able to give input as this moves forward. And obviously it is moving forward. So we have to prepare ourselves today, recognizing tolling is a reality. How it's implemented, though, has not been set in place. And each and every one of us has an opportunity to impact that outcome. So I encourage you to get engaged. We'll look for Bill's legislation that he's going to be introducing and stay focused.